What if the most important discovery in human history was hidden inside a boring data file that almost nobody read? What if the object scientists called a comet was never a comet at all, and the proof was sitting in plain sight, buried under technical language, released on a quiet Monday morning when the world was looking the other way? Here is the truth they hoped you would miss. On January 27th, NASA and the European Space Agency released a massive data dump. No press conference, no headlines, no celebration. Just a quiet upload of images and technical files dropped onto the internet, like someone trying to slide a confession under a door without being seen. But some people were paying attention. The files were analyzed, the images were studied, and what emerged from that data is not just surprising, it is civilization-changing. Let us go back to January 22nd, because that is the day everything changed. According to a scientific bulletin and a detailed analysis by Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard University, the object known as 3I, Atlas, entered a rare cosmic alignment on that date. It passed almost directly between Earth and the Sun at an angle of just 0.69 degrees. For context, that kind of precision threading does not happen with a random rock once in 1,000 years, it barely happens once in a million. But that is not even the most remarkable part. When an object passes between Earth and the Sun at that angle, sunlight illuminates it from behind, in a phenomenon astronomers call forward scattering. Every particle of dust, every gas vent, every physical structure on the object becomes visible. It is the equivalent of shining a light through a frosted window suddenly. You can see everything. So, scientists pointed the Hubble Space Telescope directly at 3I, Atlas. They wanted to see the dust cloud, the gas emissions, the normal behavior of a comet, and Hubble delivered but not what anyone expected. The images, captured using the Wide-Field Camera 3, showed a dramatic surge in brightness. That part was normal. What was not normal was the shape of what was glowing. The data revealed 4 distinct jets of material. One large jet, called an antitail, was pointing directly at the Sun and Earth simultaneously. That alone raised eyebrows. But it was the remaining 3 jets that stopped researchers cold. Professor Loeb noted in his published analysis that these 3 smaller jets were separated from each other by exactly 120 degrees. Read that sentence again. Exactly 120 degrees. Picture a Mercedes-Benz logo. Picture a perfectly balanced tripod. Picture the most stable 3-point geometric configuration that engineering has ever produced. That is what Hubble photographed firing out of this object in the vacuum of space. Nature does not work this way. Comets crack and fracture randomly. They vent gas from weak points in their surface. They do not, under any known physical law, expel material in a mathematically perfect triangular pattern. 120 degrees is not geology. It is not chemistry. It is not ice sublimating under sunlight. 120 degrees is engineering. It is thrust vectoring. It is stabilization. And Professor Loeb, one of the most credentialed astrophysicists alive, asked the question in his own paper, could these 3 mini-jets represent a technological signature? He chose careful academic language, but between every measured, cautious line of that paper, the message was screaming, this is not a tumbling rock, this is a stabilized craft. On January 22nd, it did not accidentally drift between us and the Sunday, it aligned itself. It turned toward the star. It deployed what appeared to be stabilization systems and fired a directed burst of energy, and the most powerful telescope humanity has ever built was there to witness every second of it. Now here is where the story stops being merely astonishing and starts being deeply unsettling. At the exact same moment, Hubble was capturing those 4 jets, another instrument was supposed to be watching. NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite, known as TESS, was perfectly positioned in orbit to record the entire alignment event continuously, in high resolution, without interruption. TESS was literally built for this kind of observation. It stares at bright objects for weeks without blinking. It is hardened against solar radiation. It is one of the most reliable pieces of technology humanity has ever launched into space. And NASA's own blog post from January 27th confirms that TESS was indeed observing 3I, Atlas, during this period. They even released a short video, a grainy, low-resolution clip of a bright moving dot. But look at the timeline carefully, because there is a gap. A very specific, very suspicious gap. The blog post quietly mentions, almost as an afterthought, and that that TESS experienced an interruption from January 15th through January 18th, and that there are missing frames clustered precisely around the alignment event on January 22nd. The explanation given? A solar panel issue. The spacecraft entered safe mode. Safe mode. That phrase should trigger immediate recognition in anyone who has followed space anomalies across the decades. Every time something extraordinary happens near one of our instruments, every time a camera is pointed at something, it should not be seeing the hardware malfunctions, the tapes go missing, or the satellite quietly shuts itself down. TESS is not some aging, fragile observatory. It is a modern, purpose-built machine that should have recorded everything. And it went dark at the single most important moment in its operational history. But consider a different explanation, one that fits the evidence far more precisely. When 3I, Atlas fired that anti-tail beam toward the sun, what if that beam was not just light? What if it carried an electromagnetic component? A localized burst powerful enough to act like a directed pulse, and TESS, sitting nearby in orbit, was caught in the edge of that signal, its sensors blinded, its computer forced to reset. NASA calls it a panel issue because the alternative explanation is something they are not prepared to say out loud. What we may have experienced on January 22nd was not a malfunction, it was collateral damage. Our instruments absorbed the overflow of a transmission we were never meant to intercept, and the agency responsible for protecting that information quietly buried the incident inside a technical blog post. Meanwhile, Professor Loeb was not sitting quietly. He published a new article calling for an urgent global framework for detecting and responding to interstellar objects, a network he calls the SISON architecture. On the surface it sounds like routine academic planning. But read the details. He is calling for lunar interferometers. He is calling for interceptor missions. He explicitly discusses what he calls techno-signatures and warns that humanity must prepare for a black swan event in which an interstellar probe poses a direct threat. He uses the word escalation, a word that belongs to military doctrine, not scientific methodology. You do not escalate a research project. You escalate a confrontation. Loeb is not proposing a discovery network. He is drafting the blueprint for a planetary defense system, and 3I, Atlas, is the reason it suddenly needs to exist. Now focus on one specific detail from his original report, because it reveals something the broader coverage missed entirely. Of the 3 mini-jets photographed by Hubble, 2 were bright and fully resolved. The third was faint, noticeably weaker than the others. Loeb suggested the viewing angle might explain the difference. But the geometry of a 120-degree separation during a direct solar alignment means we should have seen all 3 jets with equal clarity. If one is dim, it is not hidden, it is damaged. And this changes the entire profile of the object. We are not watching a perfect, invincible machine crossing the cosmos with flawless precision. We are watching something that is wounded. The oscillation and wobble detected back in December, the irregular spin that puzzled researchers, that was not a scanning maneuver, that was instability. Something damaged this object before it arrived. Perhaps a million-year journey through interstellar space wore it down. Perhaps it encountered something at the edge of our solar system. Either way, it is now operating on 2 functional thrusters instead of 3, and a damaged, desperate machine that needs energy is far more dangerous than a healthy one passing through. This brings us to the question of where 3I, Atlas, is actually going, because NASA's official answer is wrong, and the evidence to prove it was hiding inside the same data dump they released. The agency told us from the beginning that this object was on a hyperbolic trajectory. That means it swings in toward the sun, uses gravity to redirect its path, and then exits the solar system permanently, a one-way journey back into interstellar space. That was the reassuring story. That was the exit narrative designed to make the world move on. But a hyperbolic trajectory depends entirely on one assumption, that the object is a passive body, driven only by gravity and momentum, with no ability to alter its own course. On January 22nd, that assumption was destroyed. When those 3 jets fired, the object's velocity changed. Not because of gravity, because of thrust. The supplementary files included in the ESA portion of the data dump, the ones that were not highlighted in any press release, contain vector diagrams showing exactly what happened to the trajectory after the January 22nd event. The delta V, meaning the change in velocity, is unaccounted for by any gravitational model. The object applied its own braking force. It did not stop, because nothing stops instantly in space, but it bent its curve. It is no longer on a path toward the Hyades star cluster. It is no longer leaving our solar system. According to the corrected trajectory data, 3I, Atlas is entering a high eccentricity capture orbit, and the furthest point of that new orbit aligns with Jupiter. It is going to park at Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system, with a magnetosphere 20,000 times stronger than Earth's, a natural particle accelerator, the single most powerful source of electromagnetic energy in the solar neighborhood outside the Sun itself. If this object is damaged and needs to recharge, if it needs to harvest energy before whatever comes next, Jupiter is exactly where it would go. And once it reaches Jupiter, it will fire those jets one final time to circularize its orbit. Then it will go dark, hiding inside the radiation belts, where our instruments cannot see clearly, watching, waiting, or doing something we have no framework to predict. There was also something discovered in the file index of the NASA data dump that demands attention. The archive was incomplete, certain files were missing, but the file names were still visible in the directory listing. Among them, spectrogram anomaly high frequency, trajectory correction delta V, unaccounted, and one that is deeply difficult to explain away, target lock confirmation, who is locking onto whom. The Hubble images show the antitail pointing directly at Earth. We assumed we were the observers studying an interesting visitor. But what if the observation was mutual? What if the 120-degree jet configuration served a secondary purpose, dispersing something across the maximum possible volume of surrounding space? Dust, sensors, something we have no name for yet. And if so, we are already inside whatever was released. The complex organic signatures detected in the object's coma, the unusual golden luminescence, observed on January 22nd, we were breathing the output of a machine that had just shifted into a new operational mode. Now people are reporting seeing that golden glow again, and 3I, Atlas, is supposed to be millions of kilometers away. So the question is not academic anymore. The window to Jupiter closes in approximately 38 days from the date this information was released. After that, there will be 600 million kilometers between us and whatever 3I, Atlas becomes on the far side of the solar system. The mainstream will stop covering this. They will tell you the comet has faded. They will say it is safely exciting. They will manage the information the same way they managed it from the beginning, with silence, with carefully worded statements, and with data dumps designed to overwhelm rather than inform. But you now have the facts. The 120-degree jets. The 0.69-degree alignment. The damaged third thruster. The missing test footage. The interceptor language in Loeb's proposal. The hidden file names. And the trajectory that no longer leads out of our solar system. 3I. Atlas performed a controlled, deliberate maneuver on January 22nd. It aligned with the Sun at surgical precision, fired stabilization thrusters in a perfect engineering triangle, and redirected its course toward the most powerful planet in our solar system. This is not a rock. This is not a comet. This is a machine executing a mission that began long before humanity wrote its first word, and that mission has just entered its next phase. The silence from the agencies was never confusion. It was a calculation. And the noise is only beginning. If this video made you think differently about what is happening above our heads, share it with someone who needs to know. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think 3I, Atlas is really doing at Jupiter? Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because as this story develops over the next 38 days, we will be here reporting every detail they hope you never find.